Have you ever felt completely alone, even when surrounded by everything you ever wanted? This is the story of Douglas Smith, a man who had it all, or so he thought. Get ready to uncover a truth that will challenge what you believe about success and happiness. Douglas Smith surveyed his kingdom. From the dizzying height of his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, New York City sprawled beneath him like a glittering carpet. He had conquered this city, or so it seemed. He owned it piece by piece, deal by deal. His apartment was a testament to his triumph. Sleek modern furniture, original artwork that cost more than most people's homes, and a wine cellar stocked with vintages older than he was. A private chef was already preparing his breakfast, a meticulously plated low-carb affair designed to fuel another day of relentless ambition. But as Douglas gazed out at the cityscape, a strange feeling gnawed at him. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't even contentment. It was emptiness, a vast echoing hollowness that seemed to grow with each passing year, each successful deal, each addition to his already overflowing coffers. His phone buzzed, jolting him back to the present. A reminder for a breakfast meeting with a potential investor, another opportunity to expand his empire. He plastered on the practiced smile, the one that exuded confidence and power, and headed towards the elevator. The day unfolded as predictably as a well-rehearsed play. High-stakes meetings, complex negotiations, the constant pressure to outmaneuver his competitors. He moved through the day with ruthless efficiency, a shark in a sea of ambitious predators. Lunch was a power lunch at a Michelin-starred restaurant, filled with veiled threats and unspoken promises. Dinner was a lavish affair at a private club, surrounded by sycophants and social climbers. Each interaction felt transactional, devoid of genuine connection. People wanted something from him. Money, influence, access. He gave it to them in carefully measured doses, always ensuring he got more in return. Later that evening, after dismissing his driver and pouring himself a glass of expensive scotch, Douglas found himself staring at a framed photograph on his desk. It was a picture of him as a young boy, standing next to his mother, in front of their small, modest home. Her face was etched with worry, but her eyes held a fierce love. He hadn't spoken to her in months. Their relationship had been strained for years, ever since he'd escaped their working-class neighborhood and built his fortune. He saw her as a reminder of the life he'd desperately wanted to leave behind. She, in turn, saw him as someone who had forgotten his roots. He closed his eyes, a wave of guilt washing over him. He had everything he'd ever dreamed of, yet he was profoundly unhappy. The emptiness he felt wasn't new, but tonight it was sharper, more insistent. He was surrounded by luxury, yet utterly alone. The gilded cage he had built for himself felt increasingly suffocating. As he sat there, the city lights blurring through the scotch, a seed of discontent began to sprout, a nagging feeling that there had to be more to life than this relentless pursuit of wealth, a sense that something was fundamentally wrong and that things couldn't continue as they were. He didn't know what was coming, but he sensed deep down that his life was about to change. Sarah felt her heart racing as she approached the old wooden door. Douglas walked into the grocery store, the automatic doors sliding open with a whoosh that did little to soothe his frazzled nerves. He needed milk, bread, and something easy for dinner. The scotch from the night before hadn't helped him sleep, and a dull headache throbbed behind his eyes. He grabbed a basket and walked the familiar aisles, his mind still replaying the events of the previous evening. At the checkout, he swiped his black credit card, the one that always worked, always. But the cashier's face didn't light up with the usual polite smile. Instead, she frowned. "I'm sorry, sir, but this card has been declined." Douglas felt a jolt, a cold wave washing over him. Declined? There must be some mistake. Try it again. She swiped it again. Still declined, sir. A line was forming behind him. He could feel their eyes, judging, impatient. He pulled out his platinum card. Declined. Then his gold card. Declined. Each failed attempt chipped away at his composure, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. I don't understand," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. He hadn't checked his accounts in weeks. He hadn't needed to. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, with bright, curious eyes, stood next to her mother in line. She watched Douglas with a mixture of pity and concern. As the cashier announced for a manager, the girl reached into her pocket and pulled out a handful of crumpled bills and loose change. "Mister," she said, her voice clear and unwavering, "I have $15. You can have it." Douglas stared at her, dumbfounded. $15? He was a man who dealt in millions. $15 wouldn't even cover the milk. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the gesture. A complete stranger, a child, offering him everything she had, his face flushed with shame. He felt tears stinging his eyes. He couldn't accept it. "No, no, thank you," he mumbled, waving his hand dismissively. I'll figure something out." The girl's mother, Mary, stepped forward. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Don't be silly, honey," she said to her daughter Emily, then turned to Douglas. "It's all right. Let me get that for you." She pulled out her own card and paid for Douglas's groceries. He stood there, speechless, as she bagged his items. "Are you all right, sir?" Mary asked, her voice full of genuine concern. He managed a weak nod. "Yes, thank you. Thank you so much." "We all have bad days," she said, her smile warm and reassuring. "Don't worry about it." As Douglas walked out of the store, pushing his cart, he felt a strange mix of emotions. Shame, humiliation, but also gratitude. He was used to transactional relationships, where everything came with a price. He was surrounded by people who wanted something from him, but Mary and Emily had offered him something pure, something selfless. He glanced back at the store, seeing Mary and Emily walking to their car. $15, a declined credit card, a simple act of kindness. The weight of his life, the relentless pursuit of wealth, suddenly felt unbearable. He'd built his empire on cold calculations and ruthless ambition. Where had it gotten him? Humiliated in a grocery store, relying on the charity of strangers. He parked the cart in the designated area and got into his car, the leather seats feeling strangely uncomfortable. He drove home, the city lights blurring past, his mind racing. He usually relished the view from his penthouse, a testament to his success. Tonight, it felt like a mocking reminder of his failure. Later, staring out at the city skyline, the $15 loomed larger than any $1,000,000 deal he'd ever made. He thought about Emily's trusting eyes and Mary's gentle kindness. He remembered his mother's worried face in the old photograph. What kind of life was he living? What kind of person had he become? He had everything, yet he had nothing. He knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that he couldn't continue down this path. He needed to understand why that small act of kindness had shaken him so profoundly. He needed to find Mary and Emily. He needed to understand what drove them to be so generous, so human. He needed to know if that kind of genuine goodness was something he could ever hope to find within himself. He had to find them, he had to. Douglas sat in his penthouse, the glittering city lights usually a source of pride, now a mocking display of his hollow victory. He tried to dismiss the grocery store incident. $15. It was nothing, a rounding error in his world. He was Douglas Smith, for God's sake. He moved markets. He controlled fortunes. He didn't need $15 from anyone. But the memory kept replaying. The cashier's slightly impatient sigh, the red declined flashing on the screen, the rising heat of embarrassment. And then, Mary's gentle smile, Emily's quiet offer. He poured himself a scotch, the expensive liquor doing little to soothe his unease. He told himself it was just a temporary glitch, a banking error. He'd have his assistant sorted out in the morning. Everything would be back to normal. He'd go back to his meetings, his deals, his carefully constructed life. But as he swirled the amber liquid, he couldn't shake off the image of Mary and Emily. Their kindness had been a stark contrast to the cutthroat world he inhabited. He thought of their faces, the genuine concern in their eyes. He saw Mary's worn hands, Emily's slightly faded dress. They had so little, yet they gave so freely. He walked over to the panoramic window, the city spread out before him like a glittering carpet. He owned a piece of this, a significant piece, yet staring at the endless expanse of concrete and steel, he felt utterly alone. He thought about his last conversation with his mother years ago before she passed. She'd always worried about him, about the path he was taking. "Don't let money be the only measure of your life, Douglas," she'd said, her voice weak but firm. "There are things more important than wealth." He'd dismissed her then, convinced that she didn't understand the rules of the game. Now her words echoed in his mind, accusing and true. He took another sip of scotch, the taste suddenly bitter. He was trapped in a gilded cage of his own making. He had built a life based on accumulation, on power, on winning at all costs. But what had he won? He had no friends, no family, no one to share his success with. He closed his eyes, the memory of the $15 burning brighter than the city lights. He imagined Mary and Emily back in their own homes, perhaps sharing a simple meal, talking, laughing. He imagined the warmth of their friendship, the comfort of their connection. He opened his eyes, a flicker of something new igniting within him. He didn't know what it was, but it felt different. It felt like a seed of hope, planted in the barren landscape of his soul. He knew he couldn't ignore it. He couldn't go back to his old life. He needed to understand. He needed to find out what made Mary and Emily so different. He needed to know if he could ever find that kind of peace, that kind of contentment. He looked at his phone, his finger hovering over the screen. He could call his assistant, demand answers about the credit card fiasco. He could bury himself in work, pretend that nothing had happened, but he didn't. He put the phone down. He walked to his desk and opened his laptop. He typed, "Grocery store near me," into the search bar. He needed to see them again. He needed to talk to them. He needed to understand. He clicked on the store's website, searching for contact information. He didn't know what he would say, but he knew he had to try. The next morning, Douglas found himself driving towards the modest neighborhood where the grocery store was located. He felt a strange mix of nervousness and anticipation. He still wasn't sure what he was going to say, but he knew he had to see them again. He had to understand what had sparked this unsettling feeling within him. He parked a block away from the store, not wanting to draw attention to his expensive car. He took a deep breath and walked towards the entrance, his heart pounding in his chest. He spotted Mary at her usual register, her face lighting up as she helped a customer. He waited patiently, watching her interact with people, her genuine smile a beacon of warmth. He saw Emily stacking shelves nearby, carefully placing items with a quiet diligence. He noticed the way she paused to help an elderly woman reach a can of soup, her small act of kindness radiating outwards. He knew then that he couldn't just walk up to them and demand answers. He needed to approach them with humility, with respect. He needed to show them that he was genuinely interested in learning from them. He took another deep breath and walked towards Emily, his legs feeling strangely unsteady. "Excuse me," he said, his voice a little shaky. "Emily, right?" Emily turned, her eyes widening slightly as she recognized him. "Yes," she said, her voice soft. "And you're—" "Douglas," he replied. "Douglas Smith from yesterday." He paused, unsure of what to say next. He felt a surge of gratitude for their kindness, but also a deep sense of shame for his own past actions. "I just wanted to say thank you again," he continued, his voice gaining confidence. "For what you did. It meant a lot to me." Emily smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "It was nothing," she said. "Anyone would have done the same." "I'm not so sure about that," Douglas replied, his gaze drifting towards Mary. "I think you both are different." He hesitated, then added, Would you mind if I asked you a few questions about why you did what you did?" Emily glanced at Mary, who nodded encouragingly. "Of course," Emily said. "We're on our break soon. We could grab a coffee." Douglas felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had taken the first step. He had reached out, and they had responded with kindness and understanding. He knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was finally on the right path. He was finally on the path towards rediscovering his humanity, and it all started with $15 and two extraordinary women. He knew he had to visit them again, to really understand. The next day he had to. Douglas hesitated, the address Mary had scribbled on a napkin, feeling impossibly distant from his gleaming penthouse. He steered his car, a vehicle that felt more like a spaceship than a mode of transport, through the narrow streets. The houses were small, painted in faded colors, each with a tiny patch of garden overflowing with life. Kids played hopscotch on the sidewalk, their laughter echoing in the air. It was a world he had only glimpsed from a distance, a world that now felt overwhelmingly real. He parked a block away, the gleaming chrome of his car a stark contrast to the surroundings. Taking a deep breath, he walked towards Mary's house. It was a small blue bungalow with a porch swing and potted flowers lining the steps. He felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. What was he doing here? He, Douglas Smith, former CEO, about to knock on the door of a woman who had shown him more kindness than anyone he knew. He raised his hand and knocked, the sound echoing in the quiet street. The door opened, and Mary stood there, a warm smile lighting up her face. Emily peeked out from behind her, her eyes filled with curiosity. "Douglas," Mary exclaimed, her voice genuinely surprised and welcoming. "We weren't expecting you." I hope I'm not intruding," he stammered, feeling awkward and out of place. "Not at all," Mary said, stepping aside. Come in. Emily and I were just about to have some tea." He stepped inside, the small house feeling cozy and lived in. The air was filled with the aroma of cinnamon and something baking in the oven. It was a far cry from the sterile perfection of his own home. "Please have a seat," Mary gestured towards a worn armchair. Emily sat on the floor, her eyes fixed on him. Douglas sat down, feeling like a giant in a dollhouse. He looked around, taking in the details of the room, family photos on the walls, a hand-knitted blanket draped over the sofa, a stack of books on the coffee table. It was a room filled with love and warmth, a room that felt like a home. "So," Mary said, breaking the silence, "what brings you here, Douglas?" He hesitated, unsure of how to explain himself. I wanted to thank you again," he began, his voice a little shaky, "for what you did. And I wanted to understand." Mary nodded, her eyes understanding. "Understand what?" "Why you helped me," he said. "Why you were so kind." Mary smiled gently. "It's simple, Douglas. We saw someone in need, and we helped. That's what people do." He looked at her, his eyes searching for some hidden motive, some ulterior reason, but there was nothing there, only genuine kindness and compassion. But I'm nobody," Douglas blurted out. "I mean, I was somebody, but now I'm just somebody who's down on his luck." Emily piped up, her voice surprisingly clear. "You're somebody who needed help," she said simply. Her words struck him like a blow. He was somebody who needed help, and they had seen that, and they had responded with open hearts. "Can I help you with anything?" he asked, his voice filled with a newfound sincerity. Mary smiled. "Actually," she said, "I could use a hand with the groceries. The bags are getting a little heavy for me." He stood up immediately, eager to do something, anything to repay their kindness. He followed Mary to the kitchen, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He spent the next few hours helping Mary with chores around the house. He carried groceries, fixed a leaky faucet, and even helped Emily with her homework. He found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood, Douglas sat on the porch swing with Emily, watching the children play in the street. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "for everything." Emily smiled. "You're welcome, Douglas," she said. "Come back any time." He looked at her innocent face and her genuine smile, and he knew that he would. He knew that this was where he needed to be, not in his sterile penthouse overlooking the city, but here, in this small blue bungalow, surrounded by love and kindness. As he drove back to his empty apartment, Douglas felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. He had crossed a threshold, a line in the sand. He had stepped out of his old life and into a new one, a life filled with compassion, connection, and purpose. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope. He had found a sense of fulfillment in helping Mary and Emily that no amount of money could ever buy. This was just the beginning. He knew he had to keep learning, keep giving, keep connecting, and he knew with a certainty that surprised even himself that he would. He couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring. Douglas felt the weight of his old life pressing down on him as he walked into Harding Investments the next morning. The familiar hum of the office, the cold, sleek design, it all felt alien now. He knew he had to start somewhere, even if it was just a small step. He found Richard Harding in his usual spot, perched behind a massive desk overlooking the city. "Douglas," Richard said, his voice devoid of warmth, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Richard, I want to talk about our investment strategy," Douglas began, trying to keep his voice steady. "I think we need to consider more socially responsible projects, investments that benefit the community, not just our bottom line." Richard's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about? We're here to make money, Douglas, not run a charity." "But we can do both," Douglas insisted. "We can make a profit and still do good in the world." Richard scoffed. "That's naive, Douglas, sentimental. This isn't some feel-good movie, this is business." The conversation went downhill from there. Richard was unyielding, dismissing Douglas's ideas as foolish and impractical. Douglas left the office feeling frustrated and defeated. He knew this wouldn't be easy, but Richard's resistance was stronger than he'd anticipated. Later that day, Douglas visited Mary and Emily. The warmth of their small home was a welcome contrast to the coldness of his office. As he helped Mary prepare dinner, he confided in her about his struggles with Richard. "He just doesn't understand," Douglas said, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. "He thinks I've lost my mind." Mary placed a comforting hand on his arm. "Don't let him discourage you, Douglas. You're doing the right thing. It takes courage to stand up for what you believe in." Emily, who was sitting at the table doing her homework, looked up. "Grandma always says, even a small light can chase away a lot of darkness." Douglas smiled, feeling a surge of renewed determination. He wasn't alone. He had Mary and Emily, and their support meant the world to him. He spent the evening with them, reading Emily's stories and listening to Mary talk about her work at the local soup kitchen. He learned about the challenges they faced, the people they helped, and the small acts of kindness that made a difference. Inspired, Douglas decided to volunteer at the soup kitchen the next day. He spent hours serving food, cleaning tables, and talking to the people who came in for a meal. He met other volunteers, people from all walks of life, who shared his desire to make a positive impact. One of them was a young woman named Sarah, who ran a small non-profit that provided job training for underprivileged youth. They talked for hours about their shared vision for a better world, and Douglas felt a connection with her that he hadn't felt with anyone in years. Another volunteer, a retired teacher named Mr. Peterson, shared his wisdom and experience, offering Douglas guidance and encouragement. He told Douglas that real change takes time and patience, but that it's always worth fighting for. As Douglas worked alongside these new allies, he felt his resolve growing stronger. He realized that he wasn't just fighting for his own redemption, he was fighting for a better future for everyone. He knew that Richard wouldn't be happy with his new activities. In fact, he could almost feel Richard's disapproval radiating from across town. But Douglas didn't care. He had found his purpose, and he wasn't going to let anyone take it away from him. He went back to Harding Investments the following week, more determined than ever. He presented Richard with a detailed proposal for a new investment fund, one that focused on supporting sustainable businesses and community development projects. Richard listened in silence, his face growing darker with each passing minute. When Douglas finished, Richard leaned back in his chair and let out a low, menacing laugh. "You've changed, Douglas," Richard said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're not the man I used to know, and frankly, I don't like it." He paused, his eyes glinting with a dangerous light. "This isn't going to work, Douglas. You and I are on different paths now." Sarah felt her heart racing as she approached the old wooden door. Douglas sat across from Richard, the silence thick with unspoken tension. Richard's words from the previous week echoed in his head. "You and I are on different paths now." He looked at the man he once admired, the man who had become a symbol of everything he was trying to leave behind. "So," Douglas began, trying to keep his voice steady, "what exactly does that mean, Richard?" Richard steepled his fingers, a cold smile playing on his lips. "It means, Douglas, that Harding Investments needs to focus on what it does best, making money. Your philanthropic ventures are admirable, I suppose, but they're not profitable, and profit is what keeps this company afloat." Douglas felt a surge of anger, but he fought it down. He knew that Richard wouldn't understand his new perspective, his desire to use his wealth for good. "But Richard, we could do both. We could invest in sustainable businesses, create jobs, and still make a healthy profit." Richard laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You're living in a fantasy world, Douglas. This isn't a charity, it's a business, and I won't let you turn it into something it's not." The conversation went on like this for another hour, each man digging in his heels, unwilling to budge. Douglas argued for the potential of ethical investing, while Richard scoffed at the idea, clinging to his outdated and ruthless business practices. Leaving Harding Investments that afternoon, Douglas felt a sense of foreboding. He knew that Richard wouldn't give up easily. He could feel the gears turning, the wheels of a plan being set in motion. He knew Richard was capable of anything. He decided to visit Mary and Emily. Just seeing their smiles always lifted his spirits. As he drove, he replayed his conversation with Richard. He knew he needed to protect Harding Investments. He needed to make sure that his vision was not destroyed by Richard's greed. When he arrived at Mary's house, Emily ran to greet him, throwing her arms around his legs. "Douglas, you came." Mary smiled, her eyes warm and welcoming. "We're so glad to see you. Emily's been talking about you all day." Douglas spent the afternoon helping Mary with her community projects, feeling a sense of purpose that he hadn't known was possible. He helped pack food boxes for families in need, listening to Mary's stories about the people they were helping. Emily, as always, filled the room with laughter and light. As he worked, Douglas couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He noticed that Richard was calling him more often, always with seemingly innocent questions about the company's finances. He began to suspect that Richard was trying to undermine him, to gather information that he could use against him. One evening, while working late at the community kitchen with Sarah, he voiced his concerns. "I don't trust Richard," he confessed. "I think he's planning something." Sarah listened intently, her brow furrowed with worry. "What do you think he's going to do?" Douglas shook his head. "I don't know, but I can feel it. He wants to take back control of Harding Investments. He doesn't want me changing things." Sarah placed a comforting hand on his arm. "You have to be careful, Douglas. Richard is a powerful man. He won't hesitate to use whatever means necessary to get what he wants." "I know," Douglas said, his voice grim, "but I'm not going to back down. I've come too far to let him destroy everything I'm working for." He thought of Mary and Emily, of the community projects he was involved in, of the difference he was making in the lives of others. He couldn't let Richard take that away from him. That night, Douglas went home and started to prepare. He reviewed the company's financial records, looking for any irregularities, any signs of Richard's treachery. He spoke with his lawyer, outlining his concerns and asking for advice. He knew that he had to be ready for anything. The next morning, Douglas received a call from an anonymous source. The voice on the other end was muffled and distorted, but the message was clear. Richard is planning to oust you from the company. He has the board on his side. Be careful, Douglas. He's going to make you pay. Douglas hung up the phone, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that the storm was coming. He just didn't know how bad it would be. He felt vulnerable, exposed. The kindness and purpose he'd found felt fragile in the face of Richard's ruthless ambition. He knew he had to protect Mary and Emily. He wouldn't let Richard's actions affect them. He would not let his past come back to haunt him. He looked out the window at the city skyline, a sense of determination hardening his features. He had faced challenges before, and he would face this one too. He would fight for his new life, for his new purpose, for the people he cared about. He would not let Richard win. He would be ready. But as he stood there, a chilling realization dawned on him. Richard wasn't just after the company. He was after something more, something personal, and Douglas knew, with a sinking feeling, that the real battle was just beginning. Sarah's words echoed in Douglas's mind. He's going to make you pay. The chilling realization that Richard wasn't just after the company sent a wave of nausea through him. He braced himself, but nothing could have prepared him for the ruthless efficiency of Richard's betrayal. It started subtly. Douglas arrived at Harding Investments the next morning to find his access card denied. Security guards, their faces carefully neutral, escorted him to a conference room. Richard was already there, flanked by board members, their expressions a mixture of discomfort and triumph. "Douglas," Richard began, his voice devoid of any warmth, "the board has voted. We believe a change in leadership is necessary for the company's future." The words hit Douglas like a physical blow. He tried to speak, to argue, but Richard cut him off. "Your philanthropic endeavors, while admirable, are not aligned with our core business objectives. We appreciate your past contributions, but—" The but hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations. Douglas watched, stunned, as Richard outlined the charges. Mismanagement, reckless spending, a conflict of interest due to his volunteer work. Each accusation was a carefully crafted lie, designed to paint him as incompetent and untrustworthy. Within hours, it was over. Douglas was out, stripped of his position, his wealth, his status. He walked out of Harding Investments a broken man, the weight of his past crashing down on him. The city skyline, once a symbol of his success, now mocked him with its indifference. He drove aimlessly, the faces of Mary and Emily flashing in his mind. Had he put them in danger? Was his transformation a lie? Had he truly escaped the ruthless ambition that had defined his past? Despair threatened to consume him. He pulled over to the side of the road, burying his face in his hands. He had failed. The phone rang. It was Mary. "Douglas, are you all right? I heard... What happened?" Her voice was filled with concern. I don't know, Mary," he choked out. "I lost everything. I thought I had changed, but maybe I haven't. Maybe I'm still the same greedy bastard I always was." There was a pause. Then Mary's voice, calm and steady, cut through his despair. "Douglas, that's not true. I've seen the good you've done. Emily and I have seen it. Richard can't take that away from you. He can't take away your heart." Her words were a lifeline. He thought of Emily's unwavering smile, of the hope he saw in the eyes of the people he helped at the community kitchen. "But I put you both at risk," he said, his voice trembling. "We're not afraid, Douglas," Mary said firmly. "We believe in you, and we're here for you, no matter what." He drove to their small apartment. Emily ran to him, her arms outstretched. "Doug, what's wrong?" He knelt down, hugging her tightly. "Everything's going to be okay, Emily. I promise." Looking at Mary and Emily, their faces etched with concern but filled with unwavering support, a flicker of hope ignited within him. He had lost everything material, but he hadn't lost what truly mattered. He had lost his wealth, but he had found something far more valuable: human connection. He knew the road ahead would be difficult. He knew he would have to fight to clear his name and protect the people he cared about. But he also knew he wasn't alone. That night, as Emily slept soundly and Mary held his hand, Douglas felt a new kind of strength rising within him. It wasn't the strength of wealth or power, but the strength of compassion, of resilience, of love. Richard might have taken everything, but he hadn't broken him. Not yet. And Douglas knew with a newfound resolve that the real battle was just beginning. He would find a way to rebuild, not for himself, but for Mary and Emily, and for the people who needed him. He just needed to figure out how. Sarah felt her heart racing as she approached the old wooden door. The next morning, Douglas awoke with a heavy heart. He looked at Mary and Emily sleeping peacefully. Guilt washed over him. He had dragged them into this mess. He had been so focused on his own ambition that he had neglected the people who truly mattered. He needed to make things right, starting with the person he had hurt the most, his mother. He hadn't spoken to her properly in months, too caught up in deals and deadlines to even pick up the phone. He remembered her last birthday, a hurried card and an even more hurried call. Shame burned in his chest. He found her number and dialed, his hand trembling. The phone rang 3 times before she answered, her voice hesitant. "Hello? Mom, it's Douglas." A pause, a long, heavy pause. "Douglas, is everything all right?" He swallowed hard. "No, Mom, not really. I wanted to apologize. For everything. For not being there, for being selfish, for everything." He poured out his heart, telling her about losing his job, his money, everything. He didn't try to sugarcoat it. He just laid bare his mistakes and his regrets. There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment Douglas feared she would hang up. Then her voice, soft and forgiving. "Oh, Douglas, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I messed up, Mom. I know I did, but I want to change. I want to be a better son." "I know you do, honey. I always knew you had a good heart. Sometimes it just gets buried under other things." They talked for hours, longer than they had in years. He told her about Mary and Emily, about the kindness they had shown him. He told her about Emily's innocent joy and Mary's unwavering strength. He told her about the community kitchen and the people he had met there. By the time they hung up, a weight had lifted from his shoulders. He still had a long way to go, but he wasn't alone. He had his mother's love, Mary and Emily's support, and a newfound sense of purpose. He thought back to Emily's $15, a small gesture, but it had made all the difference. It had shown him that even the smallest act of kindness could have a profound impact. He wanted to do something meaningful. He wanted to use his skills and experience to help others, to pay forward the kindness he had received. He had managed billions. Surely he could manage something smaller, something more impactful. He spoke to Mary about his idea. "I want to start something," he said. "A non-profit, something small to start, to help families in need. I want to call it $15. Mary's eyes lit up. That's beautiful, Douglas." He spent the next few days researching, planning, and reaching out to contacts he still had. It wasn't easy. Many doors were closed to him now, but he persevered, driven by a burning desire to make a difference. He was no longer driven by greed or ambition, but by compassion and a genuine desire to help others. He remembered the faces he'd seen at the soup kitchen, the worried mothers, the hungry children. He thought of Emily's $15, the lifeline it had represented. He knew he couldn't save the world, but he could make a difference in someone's life. He could give them hope. He could give them a chance. The idea for $15 was simple: provide small, immediate assistance to families facing unexpected hardships. A grocery bill, a utility payment, a tank of gas, anything to help them get back on their feet. He knew he would need help, and he knew exactly who to ask. He found Emily and knelt to her level. "Emily," he said, "I'm starting a new thing, and I need your help." Emily's eyes widened with excitement. "What is it, Doug?" "It's called $15, and we're going to help people who need it, like how you helped me." Emily beamed, and for a moment, Douglas forgot all his troubles. He was building something new, something meaningful, something that would make a real difference in the world. He spent his days working tirelessly on $15, fueled by coffee and a newfound sense of purpose. He secured a small office space, a donated computer, and a handful of volunteers. He even managed to convince a few of his former colleagues to donate their time and expertise. He was no longer the ruthless CEO, the man driven by greed and ambition. He was Douglas Smith, the compassionate advocate, the champion of the underdog. He had lost his wealth, but he had found something far more valuable: a reason to live. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. He knew Richard would likely continue to pursue him, to try and destroy him, but he wasn't afraid anymore. He had Mary and Emily by his side, his mother's love in his heart, and a burning desire to make the world a better place. He was ready for whatever came next. The real battle was just beginning, and it all started with $15. His dedication to $15 would set the stage for his final act of transformation. Years later, the sun streamed through the large windows of the $15 Clinic of Hope. Douglas, his hair now streaked with silver, stood proudly watching as the first patients entered. The clinic, a vibrant building painted in cheerful colors, was a testament to his transformation, a beacon of hope in a community that desperately needed it. Mary, ever his steadfast partner, smiled at him, her eyes reflecting the same warmth and dedication. Emily, now a bright young woman, volunteered at the front desk, her laughter filling the air. The clinic offered affordable healthcare, dignity, and a sense of belonging to those who had long been overlooked. Douglas remembered the day Faith Miller had given him those $15. It was a small act of kindness, but it had changed everything. He thought of Eleanor Johnson, her gentle wisdom guiding him through his darkest hours. He owed them both so much. He had faced numerous challenges in building the clinic. There were bureaucratic hurdles, funding shortages, and the ever-present shadow of Richard Harding, who continued to try and undermine his efforts. But Douglas was no longer the man who cowered in fear. He had found strength in his compassion, in his commitment to helping others. One day a reporter approached him, eager to share his story with the world. Douglas hesitated at first, reluctant to revisit his past. But Mary encouraged him, reminding him that his journey could inspire others. He sat down for the interview, his voice steady as he recounted his rise and fall, his redemption and transformation. He spoke of the emptiness of material wealth, the true value of human connection, and the power of a single act of kindness. The story went viral, touching hearts around the globe. People were moved by Douglas's honesty, his vulnerability, and his unwavering commitment to making a difference. Donations poured in, volunteers flocked to the clinic, and similar initiatives sprang up in other communities. Richard Harding, consumed by bitterness and resentment, watched the news with a sneer. But even he couldn't deny the impact Douglas was having. His attempts to destroy Douglas had only made him stronger, more determined. Douglas never forgot the lessons he had learned. He continued to work tirelessly at the clinic, spending his days listening to patients, comforting them, and offering them hope. He knew that true wealth lay not in material possessions, but in the impact we have on the lives of others. One evening, as he sat on the porch of his small house watching the sunset, Emily came and sat beside him. "Doug," she said, "you've changed so many lives." Douglas smiled. "It all started with $15, Emily, and a little bit of hope." He looked up at the stars, grateful for the journey he had taken, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned. He was no longer the cold, materialistic man he once was. He was Douglas Smith, the compassionate advocate, the champion of the underdog. He knew his work was far from over. There were still so many people who needed help, so many communities that needed hope. But he was ready for the challenge. He had found his purpose, his true wealth, in the service of others. The Clinic of Hope stood as a symbol of his transformation, a beacon of light in a world that often seemed dark. And Douglas Smith, the man who had lost everything and found something far more valuable, continued to inspire others to value compassion, generosity, and human connection. His life was a testament to the fact that a small act of kindness can indeed change the world. He had found his resurrection in giving, and his elixir was the unwavering hope he instilled in everyone he met. His journey was complete.